All right, I say we get started. So an attendant is always in play. Mark, you wanna start us off?
Markel here.
The Baker's Moore here, Linda Miller here.
Lee Smith here.
Dan Gainsborough here.
Peter Lowett here.
Emily Rush here.
Excellent. Thank you all. So the next order of business is to define a clerk, or select, appoint a clerk for the meeting. Um. Let's see, how do I make it more attractive?
I only have one piece of paper.
Well, I write the minutes, you
Yeah.
just have to review my minutes, I don't think it's too burdensome.
I can do that.
All right,
Alright,
so Lee, thank you. It's awesome. Thank you both. So just a reminder, this Thursday at 7 o'clock. In the here, the town next door, and then in this room, I believe is overflow space. For our meeting, with our first public meeting, it's actually DCAM and our joint meeting. So we'll talk more about that in a minute. Okay. And it is also available by Zoom. So the next order of business is approving the minutes, both from the 19th, which Linda thankfully clerked for us. And are there any comments or additions?
Motion to approve.
Question.
All those in favor, we need to do a roll call, right? Yeah. So
Aye.
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 I
Aye.
Aye.
thank you.
Aye.
that's Patrick.
Oh, hi, Patrick. Okay, second set of minutes is the 26th, that John, was the clerk for. Are there any comments or additions to that?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Mark?
Markel, aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
I,
Aye.
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 thank you. I feel like that was our version of the wave. And it's just something about that that just. My head spin. Good, thank you, guys. So, the next order of business is review and approve the proposed DCAM public forum agenda and meeting questionnaire. Has everyone had a chance to look at that? And if so, are there any comments, at least on the first piece of that, which is the agenda?
Yeah.
That questionnaire was there.
Okay, well, that is very possible. Does, Paul wanna put it up on the screen? And it was tweaked a little bit. I think John Boynton took a look at it and made a suggestion to add some of the more multiple choice on
I
the
did
top.
not see.
Okay.
So.
Did you send
DCAM
this, Shannon?
I didn't, because it was stamped confidential on the top.
So,
Sorry, that's mine.
yeah, I'm just curious why some people got it and some people didn't.
It's a good question. I was corresponding with John. And I think he made a comment that he had some things to add. And
I
so,
didn't send it out because it was stamped confidential.
Yeah, the question is why John got it and none of us got it.
it could have been my error, yeah. I think the timing of it was such that I was chatting with him about another matter.
It is the idea that DCAM will circulate that, collect it, and do what they will do with it.
And share the results of it with us, or, yeah. And it was, Paul's welcome to comment on this, but the idea was really, to be at a very high level, find out who's in the room, what their connection to Concord is, what their preferred method of communication, going forward. And then there's, on the bottom end of it,
I'm looking at the screen.
on the lower portion of it, it talks about if they had any experience with MCI Concord and then also what they'd like to see happen. And that's where John made the suggestion, it's a little too open-ended and doesn't make more sense to give people some bullets, choices. I shared that, I believe, Paul, I shared that with you, didn't I?
Yeah, you did share comments with me. I think, as I said in the email, DCAM, needs to retain authorship over this, but I did incorporate a multiple choice comment to one of the two that you suggested. And we intend to have this in both a written, a paper format for folks in the room to fill out, as well as in a digital format that folks who are joining on Zoom at the meeting on Thursday are able to provide their input as well, so that, however and wherever you're joining, you can fill this out if you like.
And Paul, approximately how long after that is collected, do you think you'll be able to share the results with the committee?
I am gonna have to circle back on how long it will actually take to process that based on how many handwritten comments we get and how long those take to key in. I don't have a direct answer for that today.
No problem. Okay. So has everyone seen the agenda? We circulated that, right?
Yeah, that was in last meeting.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So,
Yeah, and I think we're about to hear a little bit more about that anyway.
okay. From Paul or from, yeah. Paul, you want to tell us what you have to share with us on the latest?
Sure. Reiterating that we have not, I think we need confirmation from you on who is going to speak on behalf of the advisory board. But we have, our commissioner will be there on Thursday. He's going to open up the conversation, giving folks an introduction to DCAM and, the general overview of, who we are and, what our goals are and how those tie to the administration's goals. My colleague Abby will speak a little bit about the process. I think we've got room. Mary, I believe my understanding is that Mary Hartman's going to speak on behalf of the select board and do an introduction of the advisory board. Is that correct, Mary?
Correct.
And then I think Dan and Patrick, we've talked about hopefully one of you saying, as one of the co-chairs, saying something on behalf of the advisory board about your process to date and the the subcommittees that you've set up and things to that effect.
That is our plan, and there's an agenda item on our meeting today to sort of just talk about what we want to be sharing. My hope is we'll at least talk about the formation of subcommittees and maybe the participants on that.
And then I'll give a little bit of an overview on both the property, which I know people have some questions about, as well as the process that we're going through. And then the bulk of the conversation will be, or the bulk of the meeting is intended to be a public hearing where we will hear comments from Concord residents and interested parties to, take into consideration in this process. I think we've talked about in the past highlighting the next engagement if, especially if the advisory board either is ready to schedule an advisory board led engagement session, or if there's opportunity to leverage another local entity that wants to host something, we'd love to put that in specifically as a flag to folks for their next touch point. But we'll reiterate throughout that this is not a one and done deal. This is a, first of many opportunities to connect and share perspectives on this opportunity and this project.
And good,
Oh, and just to that last point, I know that the League of Women Voters is thinking about having this as being a topic on one of their first Fridays, and I believe the one that's at least tentatively scheduled is the November one, which means that there's an opportunity for us to potentially do something in the month of October, which would, logically create a roughly a monthly cadence. So that was just a bit of information. And the other question I have is on the logistics for Thursday night. I assume we're gonna depend on Minuteman Media to video this and I'm looking at Shannon because she reads her notes these things. And I'm hoping that we can, make that recording of that readily available on Minuteman Media channel so that anybody who doesn't watch it live can come back and do that.
Yeah, it's certainly gonna be recorded.
Yeah, okay, and I just didn't know who was sort of in control of the Zoom.
So, yeah, DCAM is in control of the Zoom. We've asked that they do the cloud recording just so they have it, but then also Minuteman can also actually record
Okay,
on their end. So they will be doing that, and we'll also have DCAM's
okay,
Zoom recording for any backup reasons.
excellent.
Good.
Sure.
I really like the optics of, our, at least, not necessarily every single one, but our public interaction sessions being hosted by the League of Women Voters. I think it makes it feel more open to the public, more inviting, so I'm definitely favor of that in general, but not necessarily every single.
yeah. I think there's a lot of advantage to having this be a little bit of a movable feast, so that people. If people are normally engaging in civic affairs through some particular channel, they at least encounter this then, and then maybe, tune in when we set.
And that's probably much better publicized than what we do.
Yeah. Exactly.
I thought the bridge article was very
Mhm.
helpful, to get
Yeah.
people aware, so I appreciate that. Any other comments or? And Paul, you're good, no other comments on your end?
Yeah, please, once you do have it confirmed, just let me know who is actually going to speak so that I can key that in. And if there's anything confirmed with the League of Women Voters, or as Mark said, otherwise, just keep me posted on that and I can make updates throughout the week.
Okay, well, I think Patrick, you can disagree with me, but I think it's safe to say that Patrick will probably be the person that speaks on our behalf at your meeting. And what we will get you is the comments.
I think that's fair for not showing up in person today.
That was not meant to be that way, but, and if something comes up, I can certainly. I mean, people think it's important for us as co-chairs to both be up there. It seems to make sense that one person would speak. And I'll certainly be there in person. Okay, and my hope is when we get deeper into today's agenda and we start talking about the subcommittees that there'll be some conversation about the community engagement in terms of both the first Friday and what we're saying here at this meeting. All right. The next item is a town staff update from Million.
Hi, everyone. Nice
Hello.
to see you. Megan Smuter, Deputy Town Manager. I have a brief update today. Sorry I missed the very top of the meeting. I was coming from another one, so I hope I didn't miss anything there major. But so if you discussed this already, my apologies, but the select board received an offer from DCAM for the wastewater treatment facility. I think you have that letter in your packets. That is from the commissioner to the select board. And so we knew it was coming, of course. We've been in discussions with DCAM and knew that the legislation helpfully had set some guidelines for timing so that we can all be, you know, on the same page about when to see something like this. And so right now we are reviewing the document, the letter with town council. And we've had one brief meeting and we're planning to schedule a meeting with DCAM later this month, where we'll discuss the offer, we'll discuss the technical details of the condition of the plant, and also talk about a timeline for further discussion. So it's early days here, but we're on it. We, as you know, we've contracted with Weston and Sampson to do the technical review of the plant. And so they are, you know, an excellent resource for the town, and we'll be working closely with them on next steps here. So that's one item. I did get a request from the bridge for this document, which I shared last week. And they also were curious about what the next steps are. So basically what I just said is what I said to the bridge. So I don't know if they're planning to do an article, but I also offered, with Alan's permission, you know, an opportunity to sit down with Alan Cathcart, who's our Public Works Director. Because really, this issue has a lot to do with our wastewater capacity. And so, you know, I don't know if there's an educational opportunity there to learn more about where we are and why we're so interested in this and what it could mean for Concord, and you know, why this is a real kind of critical component of this partnership and conversation with DCAM.
Who's the sit down?
What's that?
Who would the sit down be?
Oh, with Alan Cathcart.
And who else?
I was just talking about the bridge interest in this specific part of the deal, and so, you know, he had said this is really a part of a larger conversation about our capacity, and he's been working on this for decades, really. So he's a good person to connect with on that. And I think raising awareness about where we are is important, because it's it impacts a lot of our development in town, and it impacts, you know, the potential of this partnership as well.
Maggie, just a quick question, or maybe for Linda, the Novo project, is that tying into town sewer, or is that, are they doing their own system? Anybody know that?
Yes, they are.
They are tying into the
They're
town.
tying into town sewer,
Yeah.
the Concord Municipal Affordable Housing Trust has funded
That's right.
nearly $400,000 for the sewer hookup fee for the 51 affordable units.
Thanks.
Can I ask a baseline question? I'm not sure if it's been asked or in this. So the decision to buy it, why was there not, or is there a consideration of not buying it because the state has to keep it running to supply the farm, to supply the DOT building, to supply the state police barracks? So knowing they can't shut it down, then why wouldn't we try to work with them where they would retain control of it and have responsibility of it, and then try to buy capacity from them? Seeing as I would assume they would want to sell the extra capacity.
So your question is,
Why buy it as opposed to
Why
why with the state? And taking the extra, I mean, yes, we need the capacity, but they have to keep it running anyway, so why are we taking on the responsibility?
we haven't done anything yet. We received the offer and we're.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a conversation, no, I'm just curious what the rationale would be. I'm sure it's been discussed, I haven't heard it discussed, so.
Yeah, I think we might have,
I can tell you that.
I think he might be walking up right here. Alan. No, Alan never just.
Here's Bernie Allen.
Yeah, this is not, I am not gonna speak intelligently on this.
Right, Alan,
We don't
speak
mind.
intelligently. So my question is the baseline, why do we wanna open this and control it as opposed to trying to come up with a deal where they have to own it and the state has to own it?
The
control it,
wastewater treatment.
Since they can't, they have to keep it operating anyway for their barracks and the DOT and the farm. why would we wanna leave control of them, make them responsible for it, and then try to get some, I would assume they'd wanna sell the extra capacity to us, I mean, what else are they gonna do with it? So,
So the issue becomes extra capacity, that's to be determined.
mhm,
So right now, they're really, they have an allowance that they've identified for their use. There's gonna be an allowance for some of the expansion or redevelopment to be determined. And if for whatever reason, at any time the town decides this isn't to our advantage,
Mm.
that could be an option. But right now, we're in the business of wastewater treatment. They have facilities in different, and we know, we have their engineer for DOC works for me right now.
mhm.
Their MO is to allow facilities to just, this is a 40-year-old facility that hasn't been invested in for 40 years. The town has a treatment facility that we have to maintain, so we have the expertise as far as the ability to do this. It's a partnership, one way or another, but what's important is, and DCAM understands this, it has to be mutually beneficial,
Mhm.
and the mechanics of that haven't been determined yet. That's all, so I wouldn't say it's off the table,
Yeah,
but I would lead with the town's in a better position if it's managing that. Because we need to be more strategic than they do
mhm.
for it to work.
So we'll do a better job of maintaining it, basically.
As well, and do more advocacy for what more can be done with it.
So then there's still a question of, like you said, whether that's releasing it from them, whether we own
Correct.
straight out of the whole, because there's a reversionary interest in this offer, so. And there's a lot of, you have to use it for MCI, so there's, to me, there's a lot in this letter that's putting burdens on us that, without putting burdens on the state. So it sounds to me like you guys are still having this conversation.
Oh, we're just at the beginning of the conversations. This is-
They said, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
What can you tell us about the nature of Weston and Sampson's report?
sure.
What information they'll give you and what timing is relative to this expiration of the offer in February
Okay.
next year?
We hired Weston and Sampson to do work for us, which is broader than MCI. So they're an engineering, design engineer firm with wastewater expertise, but also planning expertise. So they're in to help us with our revisiting our comprehensive wastewater master plan, update that. That's one of their responsibilities. Part of it is to look at alternative treatment or disposal sites to some degree, whether it's groundwater recharge in different areas. They've supported us or assisted with us in the past. MCI just happens to be something which we're revisiting with them. But based on schedule, we targeted their effort there first to do a needs assessment of that facility. So we now know that a 40-year-old facility has a need of somewhere about $25 million over 5 to 10 years of investment to restore it and make it a viable treatment facility for the next 20, 30 years.
For this current capacity.
Current capacity. And so that was sort of step one. DCAM is gonna hire, now DCAM, and this is no slight, they're kind of planning more than engineering, right? This isn't what they do. They are gonna hire their own engineering firm. So we volunteered after sort of a meeting, again, this is a collaboration. We're doing work. We don't want the state to waste money on work that we've done. We're willing to participate and sit down with their engineering firm to say, this is what we know. This is the work that we've done. How can you complement this so we can figure out kind of, a collective approach to this? And they seemed amenable to having that conversation. They were behind the schedule because of hiring. They didn't have engineers. They hadn't hired them yet, but that's where they work with Megan. We're in the process of reaching out to say, we've done our first step. We're ready for you to introduce us to your team. And then what we want them is to understand that our engineers know what they're doing. That's what their engineers will help them understand. And when we present the data, they can kind of peer review it, look at it. But if we say, this is an asset liability, they'll be on the same page. And they need their engineering firm to say, does that make sense? Does the work the town did, is that legitimate? If they can say yes, then at least we start the negotiation with a good baseline of, there are the needs.
So, so the current capacity is 300,000?
310,000.
And will they be doing scenarios that will help us in terms of planning scenarios? That is, will it be like tranches of, oh, if you want to put in X number of housing?
Yeah, Weston and Sampson will help us with that.
Okay, so they, and when will you sort of know what those be like steps of, you know?
Think we did a budget. And we all know there's a certain budget of that 310 that has to go to existing use, so that's part of the budget. Then the next part of the budget is gonna be, well, what do you envision? Actually, they're gonna know what the town's needs are. And then we're gonna have to look at what about the redevelopment needs, and we're gonna be looking at those three components to say, here's the allocation.
What are you referring to when you say the town's needs?
Beyond that campus and that footprint for redevelopment.
So just maybe this will help, but, so you currently may have some needs that you're dealing with one way or another, or struggling to meet. This would potentially address that.
Correct. The town is at its allowance allocation. At our wastewater treatment plant, so we need additional capacity.
Does that include Novo?
Novo is, so. How do I put this? Novo will be adding to our existing capacity. And I think you understand, it's not a fixed number, it's kind of a range. And so Novo is the largest, we couldn't accept another Novo right now. With what we have to, treat. And we are literally in a process where. When we start the CMP, we'll bring the state in the mix, so they understand, we're not just sitting waiting for a problem. We're proactively trying to manage the fact that we believe we're at effective capacity. We're trying to continue to, we don't want a moratorium. We have a 40B that's coming, and we have this opportunity. And by the way, the town has some other needs. In fact, the state has other interests, affordable housing. We're trying to figure out a way to have the policy reflect into the regulations, and we're trying to connect those dots. So it's complicated.
So the planning, the policy, the planning and the regulations, right?
That's right. The policy, the regulations are the real governor.
Yeah.
Policy is a nice idea. But we're trying to make sure the state's aware of the fact that they have interest for town that we're trying to realize that we can't presently.
Are you talking about additional housing on the MCI site?
That would be one of them, yeah. That's their
Or
interest.
is this,
Well, their interest is also MBTA zoning. That's the state policy. That's how the town ended up with, having to look at the zoning issues. That's what the state wanted, and the town has to meet, but we need the utilities to service those things.
so to that point, is this whole evaluation process including possibility of significant expansion on site
Expansion,
of the wastewater treatment facility?
not expansion of the wastewater treatment facility within the budget. That's what I'm saying.
So you're not looking at expanding that treatment plant?
For the town's interest, we are. See, if we just went to the developer, they would have a permit and they would work with the budget of what they have the state and then whatever they could do on the campus. The town doesn't have much say in that. By the town controlling that, we have an interest to try and leverage that to be more than just what it could meet on that site. That's our interest. And we'd be looking to expand that creatively.
On site?
Well, we'd be looking at that campus as well as our wastewater treatment plant and trying to figure out something that would work. They wouldn't be mutually exclusive if the town ran.
My real question has to do with acreage. And if at the end of the day, whatever decisions are made.
Yep.
Additional acreage than what its current configuration is needed. Then that's acreage that comes out of other future development on the
Correct,
site.
correct.
So my real point
Yeah.
is, once the town administration makes any decisions with that regard, they should tell us and the rest of the public
Correct.
what that is, and which equates to we're gonna need 20 acres that you can't do anything else with.
Whatever
Whatever
that
the number is.
Correct.
So my point is, I'd like to hear that as soon as,
Yeah, we could, when it's something to actually,
this is in the future.
yeah, right, but that is
It's
part of
really
our.
important, because it's very different master planning,
Correct,
25 acres versus 51 acres.
that's right, that's correct.
And the same goes for, I'm sorry to get off topic, but the same goes if DPW is a possibility of
Mhm.
going over there, because then.
That's right.
Another 25
Exactly.
acres.
Exactly,
So then are we master planning 10 acres? I
correct,
don't know,
but I hear you.
But so it does sound like the requirements in broad terms for additional capacity that's beyond what the state's using and beyond the redevelopment of the property, that would be a portion at least covered by Weston and Sampson's report, because it's a comprehensive report.
Yeah,
So we
that's-
have an idea of what might need to be set aside in this master planning process to expand that facility at some point in the future.
Correct.
Okay, that's good.
And would that be available on what time frame in terms of should we just assume that we're gonna meet this February deadline, or that it will just assume that it's going to have to be
I missed the conversation earlier, did you talk about what that deadline means?
I said that we're gonna schedule a meeting later this month to talk about the schedule.
Yeah, so it's important to understand
Yeah.
that deadline is a reasonable time period for the town and DCAM to seriously start having these discussions. It isn't we don't have to we don't take the keys on, in February for that. We literally need to engage in a discussion that says we're on the same path or not. I think that's what we're gonna be looking to do over the next, few months.
I thought what I heard Linda asking about before, though, was sort of a time frame for how soon we expect to have something from Weston and Sampson that we can understand these, at least the larger elements.
Okay, to be realistic, the original CWMP was about 3 years and about 70+ meetings, public meetings.
Yeah,
That was the original CWMP. Now, we're going to look at that and reimagine, well, what were the primary planning decisions back then? Certain areas of town that needed to be expanded, if we were gonna expand, control the allocation. I think over the next year, we're gonna be looking at very publicly reevaluating if we're going to have any capacity. Is it the same commitment or we need to modify it? I think it's fair to say the town is in a different place now than it was 25 years ago. And so I think we just need to make sure that the community understands if there is any additional capacity, where and how is it being apportioned? And that's where, right now, at this point, we have about 150,000 gallons that we could potentially expand our existing wastewater treatment plant. That's it. That's not a lot of capacity, and that's not inexpensive for the town to do independently. And that would be putting a groundwater recharge over at our existing treatment facility. It's not ideal, but that's what we've always had in our back pocket. But that 150,000 would still have to be apportioned. Is it based on the decisions and planning assumptions from 25 years ago? Or is it in keeping with today's needs? And that's what I think we want to publicly kind of share and communicate. We literally just got Weston and Sampson on board about 2 months ago. So, the good news is the team is very familiar with our plan, the original plan, the same players to help us.
so if we're trying to gather that as input to the planning process, what sort of timeframe should we expect that information will begin to be available? Recognizing that we're gonna talk on Thursday about a planning process that's like 3 years long. The question is really, is it sooner or later in that process that we'll begin to really understand what the parameters are around the wastewater treatment capacity?
I think for, Thursday, we don't have a schedule yet.
Yeah,
We will be, we're literally meeting with Weston and Sampson on Friday to start mapping out some of these pieces of the puzzle. But I think what my interest will be, and kind of work with Megan, is to come back to this group to provide, fairly regular updates.
Yeah.
But right now, it's just too soon, to, give you anything that you really wanna put down as a plan.
Can I go?
Yeah, of
With
course.
yours? Just, not to put Alan, either you or Megan on the spot, but presumably, maybe I shouldn't be assuming anything, but, the capacity issues associated with the water system and the capacities, associated with the electrical grid, these things will also, not by Weston and Sampson, but, well, maybe Weston and Sampson on the water, but, are you sort of leading the charge on?
So when it comes to water, yeah, Public Works would be involved, and I don't see that as acute an issue. I think the real issue, just to understand, we used to serve MCI Concord with water, just not wastewater. So I mean, we're familiar with the full, sort of 300,000 gallons a day demand they would have in water. With the light plant, I think we need to, sort of bring them into the mix. I'm not exactly sure what their interests are, but I haven't been involved with those discussions.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
I asked them,
Sure, sorry.
No, sorry, how sympathetic is the state to the fact that they want housing and. You know where I'm going with this,
Yeah,
it's
I
gonna
do.
cost us millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars to do this,
Mm-hmm.
and do they care, or are they like, well, our mandate is housing, so you guys better figure it out, because we're gonna.
There is a task force, I think through the, Secretary Augustus is convened to look at unbundling or unshackling the policy regulatory constraints for housing.
In
And
their reality,
they have developers and they have regulators on this task force, and I spoke to them about a month ago about the challenges that if you don't have the infrastructure, you can't realize your policies. I sit on the Public Works Committee at Mass Municipal Association, touting the same thing. There is an understanding that outside of the metropolitan area, you're running into real issues when it comes to drinking water, wastewater, stormwater support development. And so it starts with awareness, and they're being made aware that there's a disconnect. And, it's.
I think it's hugely important.
So
I mean, I know you know that, but in terms
Yeah,
of our
no,
discussions.
agreed,
because-
everywhere on the table, and,
Yeah.
I partnered, and Megan knows in Maynard, where she used to work. They have serious water constraints, not wastewater as much as the drinking water side, where they're literally turning development that they want away.
And there's a 40B going in and they can't say no, so that's like the disconnect
Right.
of
Exactly,
the-
so when we
yeah,
talk
the
about
challenge.
whether we're on the same team here, I think it's, we just gotta be honest that they want more housing, and whether it's our problem to pay for the infrastructure, I'm not sure that's, on their mind. So we gotta look out for our own interest as much as possible.
Thank you. Linda and then Aaron.
So I've heard, and I'd like you to correct me, if this is inaccurate, I've heard that when you see the restraints, that there are certain requirements for housing in terms of capacity that needs to be available. But that because of various aspects in terms of technology with changes in washing machines and low flush and the whole thing, that those requirements are outdated. And so really what you're talking about, is it just having the state say that these requirements are outdated, we can upgrade that, so that all of a sudden you have this magically new capacity, but you're not actually building to it? Or is it actually something that you have to be building to, as opposed to just a regulatory requirement that is out of date?
It's that plus, it's not that simple, so the regulations can change. For instance, developers deal with on-site groundwater recharge, which after, when you get up above 10,000 gallons a day, you're required to do increased treatment. That increase is not just a small factor, it's a major change from almost a conventional septic system to a fairly sophisticated treatment facility. These treatment facilities are being designed and constructed and not particularly well managed for small systems, and they're starting to fail. So we're building in the belts and suspenders for environmental protection, but we're actually maybe overcomplicating what needs to be done, and maybe the threshold would be 15,000 gallons, say, or 20. And we just have to be, the whole challenge I preach day in and day out is, we have to, the out of an abundance of caution that everybody loves to exercise everywhere, we got to stop that, because we don't have the money and the luxury to do every regulation, every policy with every consideration to every environmental impact, every public health and safety impact. We've got to the point where we can't do anything out of an abundance of caution. And if that's what that means, is we just stop. Well, we can't. The communities, the policies are saying we want more. Well, then you have to look at where the constraints are, and that's what this task force is looking at. So an example could be a regulatory change, could be a standard, that has to be revisited. It's macro, and it's not just Concord, it's state and federal challenges. And the problem we have is, if we want to get creative and look at integrated water planning in a way that says we're going to do the best we can for the environment, we have to sort of pay a certain attention to public health and safety. But I've talked about PFAS to this group. We're spending billions and billions of dollars on removing parts per trillion of a contaminant to something we can't measure, but as soon as we can measure it, it's going to be there. We have to make decisions, and this is much broader than Concord, but Concord's stuck in a design basis for wastewater that's 40, 50 years old. It's not just us. I guess that's the good news. The bad news is we're kind of at the point of it, at least in wastewater. But I think this is a good opportunity where we got to get creative, and we got to match the policies, the politics, the regulations, and the practical aspects of what we have to offer to make a case and make it a good case. We're not trying to get away with anything. We're trying to be creative and effective.
Okay, Aaron, you had your hand up?
I think Alan covered it, so I'm all set, thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. Elizabeth?
To Lee's, to your point, this is hugely important and kind of
It's
makes
the
us,
whole thing.
right, unable to really do any master planning.
It's gotta be the first decision.
Well,
Right,
there,
so what do we do?
we're with the utilities that we're talking about, really, all three of the utilities, water, electric, and wastewater. There's a fixed amount of capacity in those utilities that wasn't used by the prison. This may be stating the obvious. And a significant portion of that capacity is no longer required by the existing operations. So we can plan within that for sure. And we can start that and begin to understand how much of that capacity, how much development can go inside the existing, let's call it footprint of what the prison was consuming before, up to and including their 310,000 gallons of capacity. I think that somehow I have the number 80 in my head of what the Northeast Correctional Facility and the barracks and so forth. So that's only 1/3 or less than 1/3 of the existing capacity is spoken for. So we have the rest to plan. And then the question, I think, and it's a good question, is what could we get at beyond that, assuming that whatever we decide is good for Concord goes into that site. Wants to do that, and then we have all these other needs that we're trying to cover which is that there's no development outside the site. So I would suggest that we think about it in that sort of way. Like, what can we do within the existing footprint, and then what are the investments required to do the footprint, and of course, there's the information about what investments are required to even maintain the level of capacity. When you were talking about the fact that it has this, let's call it maintenance deficit, makes me wanna stick some water testing immediately downstream of this thing and find out what's going into the river now, and is it actually doing the job that it's supposed to be doing, and I think that, I'm hoping that.
Now, let me clarify that, they're permitted, and they
Yeah.
have requirements for routine testing.
Uh-huh,
At some point, they may be really challenged, in fact, but right now, they do have a permit, they do need to meet, and if they weren't, they'd be in front of the regulators
okay.
explaining.
That's reassuring, but, I'm still, we know, as you were just mentioning, that bar is getting raised, and to Elizabeth's point. Who's gonna pay for that next ante when the bar gets raised next is a very good question.
And to Elizabeth's question, and I suspect other people around the table already know this, but, the development process, especially in this sort of early stage of scenario testing, is anything but linear. And so you're absolutely correct. It would be wonderful to know what that number is going to be. And at the same time, I think to Mark's point, and maybe to Alan's point, we got to just all kind of test some of these ideas and see what they could be. And then they become inputs in it. I mean, I know you know this, it's just maybe for everyone.
No, it's helpful to try to
So
understand.
the two endpoints that I think we need, and I fully understand that this is months, if not years down the road until we have these answers, are how much capacity is there for development on that site, whatever you decide to do?
High, low.
And how much acreage might be consumed by it, and it might be zero. But those, I think we need those two inputs before we can really effectively start master planning the site.
Well, it's 310,000 gallons a day is a permit that's in the hand, and that's the golden ticket. Whether it's privately developed or the town participates, that is the number.
But is
Less.
that
Less.
No, less.
The state?
No, less the 80,000 that Mark was, plus or minus 80. So that's what's available to
310 minus
redevelop.
80?
Yeah, redevelop that parcel. That's what's available. And the town can say, good luck, and we don't want anything to do with it. I'm telling you, the town, independent of that redevelopment, is at a point where we no longer have the ability to meet other interests of the town. And I've been sharing that for years. The problem is, it's not really registering, but that's where looking at the CWMP will really help us identify, where are we? I can tell you, we were over our permit for the past 4 months. Just dropped below our permit last month. That's good news.
That goes to prison calls.
No, the prison doesn't contribute to wastewater to our facility. No, it's a different, and that's what we're up against.
Does, one question for those of us that don't deal, for example, Novo Riverside is 200 and some odd units. How much capacity does one expect for
I forget the
wastewater or
number.
something like
Yeah,
that?
I don't wanna give you a number, it's
Yeah.
just. I got
Maybe the others
I mean,
It's-
Yeah, I'm trying, what I'm,
Is that? So-
the broad question I'm trying to get in my head is 230,000 sounds like a lot of water. What can you
Well,
get with?
Yeah, but it sounds like
200?
zero from what he's saying.
Yeah, no,
Already-
we're really kind of at, so we've also extended sewers where we have people who paid betterments who
Yeah,
have not yet connected.
yeah,
Not large,
Right.
companies or businesses, but single family homes that had paid a betterment to tie into our sewer system, and that hasn't been fully realized
Yeah.
yet. So that'll be part of the budget that we need to create, so we can say, this is what we've got, this is where we're over committed. But, the good news is our crisis for capacity in the town
Mhm.
is complementing this opportunity pretty nicely. So at least we're considering the two together. That's very, very fortuitous.
Except in this offer letter, maybe I'm wrong, it doesn't restrict us to use this capacity for the MCI development? We
No.
Have to?
No.
Okay, because,
Why are you looking for that? Erin has her hand up.
Maybe this was said before, but is there opportunity to add capacity to the MCI site, either through expanding the treatment system that's there or just using independent standalone septic systems for, I guess, smaller development?
The answer is yes, it won't be easy, but this is the journey we're about to embark on.
so it's, what I'm looking at says, following the conveyance, the town shall provide wastewater treatment services to the MCI Concord site as needed during and after redevelopment at the applicable prevailing service rates. So you're saying that could come out of any treatment. It's not this site has to provide that, but we are.
Yeah, we'll be talking with DCAM about all, they understand the mutual benefit.
Yeah.
There's no mutual benefit if it's just all allocated for that.
Okay,
Just one last point, and this is really directed to both of you. You may be restrained by the statute, but don't forget the 12.8 acres of Junction Village owned by CHTC that I think will be master planned with this for capacity purposes.
Yeah, which would be the way we need to do it, right? Yeah.
Okay,
Is,
thank you both. Oh, sorry.
sorry, Dan,
Yeah.
one other thing. I didn't see this in the letter. Is there a cost? Do we have to pay for the wastewater treatment plant, or I didn't see that in the,
Well,
To be determined.
that's, we don't know what the value is yet, you know,
Okay.
yeah, based on the value.
Sounds like the kind of deal you cut with your teenager over their old car.
Well, thank you. Maybe we're done with your update.
No, I wanted to talk about one other thing, if time allows. I think this will be covered a little bit later in the discussion, but I wanna, emphasize my interest in the conversation about public outreach with this group. And, I want to know, I'm interested in knowing what the subcommittee or what you all are planning to do regarding public outreach. Because, for a couple of reasons. One, I spoke with Paul from DCAM last week and asked him where he is with hiring consultants for this work, and one of them was to hire a consultant to support public outreach, right? Because they have a list of things they have to do. And they haven't moved forward with that yet because they're interested in knowing what the town wants to do. And like how much of a leadership role or partnership role or role at all, you know, what this group is looking to do to support the initiative, because that will impact what their scope of work is. And so I think that this is a good moment to kind of outline that. Also, I'm curious about resources, right? Like there's been some funds set aside generously through the budget legislature for planning, and there's a couple things we have on the docket that we know we're gonna need some zoning expertise. We're interested in, there's been some interest in a Urban Land Institute effort. And then maybe if there's public outreach, like I wanna think about what the requests are from this group to build it into the budget to understand what, you know, what we have to play with for these other things. And just make sure I have a handle on that. So I think that's it for now.
Well.
It's more of an ask than an update.
Thank you. That's actually very timely because it's a wonderful segue to the next section, which Patrick is going to lead. Reports in the subcommittee, because I think that's.
Great,
where
thank
those two
you.
things- Thank you.
sorry, Elizabeth Hughes, what's your hand raised if you.
Elizabeth?
Yep, sorry to jump in. I have another meeting at 1. I just wanted to give the land use subcommittee a heads up, which that committee, as I understand it, is Emily, Aaron, Dan, Linda, Peter, and Scott. I've put together a draft scope of work for the hiring of a zoning consultant. It is my goal to get that person, team, you know, whatever, on board, you know, hopefully within a month, so that they can kind of just be on board during the visioning process, so that they can hear things. When it's time to move to the next phase of zoning, they're, they heard all of the visioning, they, heard the community, and have, a better understanding. So I have a scope of work, working off the state contract. So I was going to send that out to the land use subcommittee. I can answer questions or come to a meeting and provide you any answers you need, but I just wanted to give everybody a heads up.
Thank you. That would be most.
Are we gonna talk about that as a group, whether we think, I mean, I'm not sure if I agree with that or not, we should bring on the zoning person right away before we kind of figured out some other things, but
Yes.
are we gonna talk about that outside of your subcommittee?
I think it will be discussed in the subcommittee, and then I think it will be brought, this is my thought, it will be brought back to the committee to make, with a recommendation and a rationale. So. It's a
I think
good
you should
thought.
give all the money to you to figure out the way.
That's. All right, so Patrick, you still around?
Yep.
Yes. All right, can I hand it off to you for this?
Yeah, and I'll move expeditiously because I think we're a few minutes behind, but can you hear me okay, Dan? In the room?
Yeah.
All right, great. So that was a great lead in as we think about subcommittee structure. I don't think we necessarily need to hash through it live today. But I think what Dan and I were hoping to accomplish between now and the next time we get together is that each of the subcommittees aligns on both kind of who their, the lead is, and kind of the lead of each subcommittee, and then kind of the scope of work, if you will, right? So how do you see the main goals of your respective subcommittee, and then a bit of a description on how you see the tasks to achieve those goals. So that's I think Dan has a draft of how we are preliminarily broken down from the advisory board into those subcommittees, which maybe we could use as a starting place. And then as a bit of a homework assignment for each of the groups to get together and get their thoughts over the next couple of weeks is the ask.
I have a
So
question.
maybe Dan, yeah, sure. Is that Linda?
Oh, like,
Yeah,
Dan has left
yeah.
the room. Are you planning to appoint heads of each of those subcommittees, or how are they actually going to meet, and who will call the meetings together so that we can get started?
I would probably recommend the latter, but I'm totally open if others have a different suggestion.
We can't technically talk to each other to schedule meetings, right? Like on ours, there's three of us.
That's actually an exception.
Oh, we can meet, we can schedule.
Schedule on, yes,
Okay.
yeah.
Should, I mean, seems to me like it should go through a central schedule.
I think what you're talking about is a chair for each subcommittee.
Yeah. or
Right,
at least the
well, I mean-
organizer.
The co-chairs for this committee were determined for us. I wasn't sure if the chairs were going to identify the leads, or if we were supposed to somehow, figure out when we should get together and discuss leads, who is gonna lead the process. I mean, I just been thinking like, how is this actually going to work? So that was just my question, like, what is the logistics of getting our first meeting and a chair for the subcommittee, for the lead, whatever.
Well, I don't want to trample on Patrick, but Patrick, do you have a response to that? Because I do.
No, go ahead, Dan.
Okay, so my thought would be that it would be an initial meeting among each one of the three subcommittees. And you guys would discuss amongst the people involved and decide who's gonna be, that was part of the idea of governance, who's gonna lead it. And what clarify that work that you started, which was to sort of embellish and expand on what it is that we're trying to do and make sure that everyone's in agreement on that. And then from that, sort of come up with a timeline for.
So can Shannon send out like 3 meeting times to each subcommittee, and then we all like figure out the
Make a poll.
poll to poll us on the optimal time, and then we figure a place, and then do we have to have for that initial meeting a Zoom? Does it have to be by Zoom so that we can record it and be open to the public? I just, you know.
Yeah,
I don't know
you
how
can
it's-
either meet in person, there's no requirements to have Zoom, or if Zoom is easier for people to meet at different times of day, then yeah, it's just posted on your agenda.
But we need someone to like do the agenda.
Yeah,
Well, so I
And
think,
noticing it.
yeah, correct.
I think what we're discussing right now is basically what the agenda for the first meeting of each of the subgroups is going to be, which is gonna be, you know, choose a leader. Ideate some key initiatives that we think that that group is gonna be working on. I think that's probably the.
Item 1, appoint a chair. Item 2, discuss scope of subcommittee.
Discuss scope and
And
initiative.
frequency and.
Yeah, and item 3, choose the next meeting time.
And you look concerned about that or confused.
Yeah,
No, did we resolve how?
It sounds like Shannon's gonna send out
Shannon's gonna-
emails.
yeah,
To schedule
And
the
the 3
programs.
will determine internally who will be the leader.
yeah.
Correct.
So,
Yeah, it makes sense to me that, I'm happy, some people have expressed a quote compelling, desire to be in that, so the first person to put their hand up, so. Like, and I'm thinking of Peter, if he's still on, it came to mind, he's pretty excited, right, maybe Linda too on the land use, so. And Patrick, I know, is very interested, not to speak for him, but the public engagement, and I was, just for the full disclosure, I reached out to John and asked him if he would consider shifting into the, community, engagement, because I think he's pretty, a lot of people know him, and I thought that would be good, and he agreed to do it.
So
So,
just the two of us
So,
on.
and me,
no,
Yeah, and Mark. Oh, you're on that, too, right.
And-
so
and
we'll do that. I wasn't sure whether that was confirmed, but.
Yeah, and I'm happy, just because the land use is very robust and a lot of very talented people on it, I'm happy to float around. And because I theoretically, what I'm gonna try to do is keep the glue together of this primary meeting. And so, it'll be hard for me not to have questions and sort of, and suggestions on it, but so that can, because you have 5 people on that even without me. So, and if I need to float, I'll go with them, I don't do.
We'll be fine. I forgot Mark's on too.
Yeah.
And it could be that once it kind of gets going, someone could decide, maybe I prefer this other group.
I'd like to think that's so, yeah, I mean, and I'm sorry for the confusion and the vagueness, it kind of showed up here on the agenda and. Patrick was asking me about it and I said, this is what I think, and he was asking me, do you think people know that that's what expected, and clearly that it wasn't clear. So I think we're okay, I think we're still okay, because I think now we raised the question and now we know what we're gonna do. And that may inform, this later item about what are we gonna be saying. And that.
And then on a ongoing basis, do each of these subcommittees, every time that general committee meets, there will be
Report.
a report?
That's my hope, and I don't want to be burdensome, but just, we said we were gonna be focused on this, we've made progress on 2 out of 3. This issue that just came up before I had to step out, about the, hiring, to Elizabeth's point, with hiring consultant or not, I think. It's hard to do, not to take anything away from us, but I think when you get 10 people around the table or 12 people around, it's hard to do anything, just even to take roll call, it takes 3 minutes. So my thought is, let's do some of that work. Because there's a nice diversity of experience and stuff among the group. Say, here's what we think, and if somebody wants to come, because I have no doubts that anyone at this table would say, that kind of doesn't make sense to me, you know, when it comes back to the group. Or I don't understand this, can you explain why you got to that? I think that will be more efficient. If it, to your point, Lee, same with governance, if it proves not to be effective way to do it, then we'll alter it. But it's just to get us getting some momentum.
Good.
Where are we? And so is that sort of nailed down at least for to get us to the point where when we come back? Are we 2 weeks out now, or we get, yeah, because
So does that mean that the subcommittees are meeting before the larger groups next meeting?
ideally, yeah. And I'd love to be able to, part of that selfishly, I'd love to be able to report at the, meeting on the 12th on Thursday, that's the plan, yeah.
I'm on board with it.
Okay.
But those meetings will be posted, so.
Yeah.
When we set that up.
Yeah, so since I'm actually doing this and as part of Warner's Pond, we have subgroups going. The main requirement is that you gotta get an agenda posted by 2 days afterwards, and you need to take some, at least summary minutes that. So that they can be approved, but other than that, it's just like we talked about, just meet and then read out what happens. We're also, and this might make sense in the future meetings, allocate some time. Sometime, you know, within the main meetings, which there's one tomorrow night actually. To have a little bit of subgroup work time right in that, so we just break up for a little while and go do it. That can be facilitated by the Zoom meeting rooms feature in a meeting where not everybody's present or just by having some space. It's working out pretty well, but we're each working on a separate possible solution for Warner's Pond, and then the idea is we'll come back together as a group and evaluate which one might be a group recommendation. This is a little different because we've got sort of different domains. But same general idea, mechanics of the same.
I was gonna have Patrick cover this next one, scheduled for first advisory meeting. I think you guys looking at you. Actually, it's gonna be the community engagement folks gonna come back and make a recommendation on that. That was the point behind this. You know, when we think we're gonna be ready, what are we gonna be saying? In that first,
One suggestion is that first Friday for legal.
I think that's a fabulous idea.
Yeah.
Is that too far out?
Probably not.
Probably get a lot
We're
done.
gonna- Yeah,
Totally.
no, I like that, Lee.
Yeah.
Sorry, what was the suggestion? I couldn't hear
The
it.
goal, you had asked that question earlier, Patrick, of me, and
This assumes that they'll take us.
right, if the League of Women Voters will, take our request, accept our request, we would use that first Friday meeting that they have in November, and that will give us, you may or may not have heard, other people in the rooms commented that gives us some, Lee commented, we'll have time to get some work done. So it theoretically, that will be a pretty productive first.
Yeah, that
meeting.
sounds great.
Turns out November 1st is a Friday, so I don't know whether that's what they're.
I hope
So-
Probably, yeah, Diane
So
Proctor isn't on Zoom, she usually is, but I had spoken with her about something else, and she brought up to me how the league wants to do first Friday of MCI Concord, so I think they will have us, and they usually stick to the first Friday, so should be November 1st.
Okay,
That's 7 weeks.
good. And this may be another example, I'm gonna take 7 because this may be another example of me thinking that I was adequately communicating things when maybe I hadn't. So did folks see John Thornton's summary of the Envision Concord? And the other, I think he did that in conjunction, I think Elizabeth helped him pull some of that stuff together. Which was great. So what I was imagining might happen here is that some or all of you may have taken a look at it. Enough so that you'd say in this last section on the document that's dated August 29th, 2024, overview of Envision Concord 2030 as it relates to MCI Concord. It also towards the back covers a little bit of, the West Concord master plan, and then the last section deals with other reports that might be relevant. And so, my hope, just in terms of putting this on here was to say, and I don't necessarily think we're gonna have an answer today unless we do. What do we want to do with this information? Do we want to discuss it as a group? Does it make more sense to try to do it in the context of the subcommittees? And what, if any of those supplemental 7 reports do we want to burden or ask Shannon to help us try to pull together, you know, and so this is a sort of a broader question of how are we going to digest what is clearly going to be a ton of information. Alan's report is already making my head explode, even though I have no idea exactly what it's going to look like, but I can imagine having seen some other things. So, you know, how do we do this effectively? And again, I don't have an answer. I don't expect us to have an answer, but I do think it'd be worthwhile for us to talk about it. And while it's on my mind, because I think this is a kind of a related topic, I'm hoping that in the subcommittee forums, that the groups will begin to define their goals, so that we can bring them back, we can compare and contrast, and we can all say, yep, those make sense to me. Because I do feel like, and Elizabeth's questions often really trigger it for me in a good way, that I realize that we're missing a couple of, we need that map, those driving instructions. And so I want to keep on doing that. So that's just so I'm said it out loud. I'm hoping that's some of the work that would come out of some of these early meetings in the subcommittees. I think that's all I have to say. And since Alan already covered the wastewater treatment plan, I want to thank you.
Good.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say thank you.
I don't want to leave, but yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Alan.
Thank you. Getting along, getting this thing. I thought the summaries of Envision Concord was very helpful. I think that, you know, you could go point by point and imagine, you know, at least a short work stream, if not an evaluation criteria for whatever planning we do that relates to each one of these sort of topic areas. And so I think it makes sense for us to begin to boil those down. The only sort of other report that I think, or coordination point that I've mentioned it a number of times before, is that, you know, the Warner's Pond Group is actually trying to figure something out right now. So presumably that recommendation is coming forward sometime this fall, and so at some point we need to fold that in. What's emerging out of that is that there are some interesting intersections, let's call it, when you put a recreational facility and parcel right next to a conservation parcel, and then start to play out what the goals for the use and capabilities of those parcels are. And so I can see the same sort of thing happening in the MCI property, because we've got all that riverbank, and there's, you know, if we go in there with recreation kinds of allocations, then we get into some interest, and the expectations that come up, you know, that there's some sort of overarching strategy for that. Those expectations arise, and yet, you know, there seems to be a little bit of, well, recreation department's doing this, and conservation regulations say you can only do that, and who sort of referees that is an interesting set of questions that are arising out of it as we try to, you know, really, you know, engage with what's happened over at Warner's Pond, as the Bruce Ring Rail Trail has gone in, as the pavilion has gotten built, as the role of the pond in that area is changing. And, you know, we're just about to interject a whole bunch more change.
Right. A great point.
So I would add that to this list of things to
Okay,
consider.
so 8.
Sorry, just, are you using that as a structural example, or are you saying that the Warner's Pond situation somehow affects the MCI situation?
I'm using it as both, people that are familiar with the Warner's Pond issue understand that there was actually an agreement that the dredging spoils, had the dredging project gone through, were going to be disposed of on MCI land, so that's a very concrete way in which the two things are linked, should that go on, so. But I'm also suggesting that there's a lot of, there's going to be a recommendation about how to proceed with Warner's Pond, and there's a little bit of. Certainly, I've heard in expressed there that there's a desire for the Warner's Pond group to understand what we might be recommending at MCI just as much as the reverse may also be true. So I think that's, you know, there's just two live projects that naturally intersect with each other. We should recognize that and come up with a strategy how to sort of channel that energy.
Maybe at some point there should be a joint meeting.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, and I agree with your point, Mark, but you know, I highlighted some of the sections and all these things would apply to the consideration of it. The one thing that struck me, and maybe others noticed it, I think it was. Yeah, on the executive summary, it's page 13. On the left-hand column, the last bullet says, develop a strategy to anticipate acquisition of properties currently owned by the federal or state entities within Concord boundaries as they become available and declared surplus. So that's, you know, that's as much as we knew, obviously, at that point, again. Okay, so maybe people could think about between now and the next meeting, you know, do we want to, does it make sense for us to have, in the interest of saving, not cutting down a lot of trees, does it make sense for us to have like a library, either electronic or otherwise, where people could, you know, look at these things?
That already exists.
Okay, for all.
I don't have the open space plan from 2015 in there, but in terms of all of these other plans,
Here,
yeah,
okay,
Warner's Pond doesn't exist
all
yet.
right,
Yeah.
so
There's a whole page on.
Yeah,
And I'm gonna add a 9th one, because, again, didn't contemplate it, but, because I was involved in it, the Energy Futures. Report, the task force report, you know, looking at Concord.
oh, the solar.
It's yes, it was all, basically, the big idea was to get, renewable, 100% renewable by 2030, so this is, you know,
Okay.
in time. EFTF.
Also, the comprehensive wastewater treatment master plan that Alan.
Yes.
referred to, could we
Great point.
add that in?
He referred to it as CWP.
Right, I mean, I think the general topic that we spent time on today of sort of the utility infrastructures that's available to the community, not a lot of these plans and documents exist, you know, sort of from that particular silos point of view, but they aren't so much involved in this question of, you know, what can we really support and what sort of investment is necessary if you want to go a little bit further in one direction or another. So that may be something that we need to develop. And it's an example of the kind of thing that I think I mentioned before, which is when you read Envision Concord, it's a little, you know, it covers a lot of great things, but it may have a few gaps that are born out of a new, better, more complete understanding of where we are today, you know, both on the electric grid and the water system and the sewer system.
Just suggestion for the future, once we're kind of rolling, perhaps some kind of energy sustainability subcommittee might be appropriate down the road.
All right, somehow you guys it's all Patrick's doing. You magically got it back sort of close to being on schedule. Public comment.
Keith Bergman, Chair of the Concord Municipal Affordable Housing Trust, I just wanted to share that for the public hearing on Thursday night, the trust has voted to authorize a statement indicating the trust's support for the 12.8 acre Junction Village property that abuts MCI Concord being included, however it can, in the master plan for MCI. And just to put our money where our mouth is, we're also saying that in the event it's found that $475,000 in state funds can only be spent on state property, the trust has reserved a sum of $50,000 in our trust fund for the 12.8 acres of Junction Village, if the need arises to have other funds. And the discussion actually was pretty helpful about what one of those needs might be. It could be wastewater. It could be that the planning for, I'm just putting, the pieces together that I'm hearing today, that if there's not any excess capacity for wastewater beyond the uses that are proposed for MCI Concord, then that would tell Junction Village that since they, CHDC, their initial development plans, which were scuttled, involved an on-site disposal system, may be that the ability to get capacity out of the MCI wastewater treatment plant is going to be challenged, and therefore, if the town has a lot of needs and can meet a need at a particular site with an on-site system, maybe you need to do that. And so I think that it's going to be a helpful process to go through and allow the CHDC at some point to proceed and get on with it for developing their product. Makes sense?
Yeah, thank you. Does anyone else have their hand? No. Okay. All right. So, thank you for the various comments about things to add in the future. I'll try to add them to the agenda. If no one else has any comments or questions.
Did we talk about this?
Oh, yes, sir. Thank you.
Staff and I'm sitting next to
Yep.
So I didn't hear what the question was, sorry.
Yeah, this is, so, Shannon and Donna, put together a flyer to be handed out.
Oh, yes.
And, I just want, Shannon asked if there were any comments and Elizabeth just asked if we wanted to talk about it, so.
Did I have any comments?
I thought it was great. I was very appreciative of putting it together. I didn't click on the, I didn't try that out, but.
The QR.
Okay, thank you, QR code.
Yeah, we also updated the FAQs that I think the link is on there, so if the board wants to review those and suggest anything to you, you could get back to me or Donna and do that.
Maybe back could double some survey form for people that want
It's a good idea.
to fill something out and just hand it back to us.
Yeah. That would be,
Yeah,
that would be,
good idea.
that would be a good example of planning, if we can do it.
Of DCAM's survey.
Yeah.
I think mine and Donna's intention with this though was that you would leave with this. Like this was a way for you to, if you want to seek out further information, this is a resource for you. Like it has, yeah, like we have staff contacts on there, we have DCAM contact on there, linked to the FAQ. So I think we want people to leave with it.
There's a way to sign up for updates, right, on the.
Yes,
Yeah, it's good. Yeah.
Maybe just we mentioned that.
yeah,
Just one question, so it lists Mary as chair of the select board, like under. I think members of the board, but should that be Mark or I'm a little just confused?
yeah, that's a good point.
Okay.
Can change that to Mark,
Yeah. no problem.
since Mark is the member, select
Yeah.
board member on the board.
All right, I would accept motion to adjourn.
Yeah, sorry, Dan, just as we think about next meeting on the 23rd, we had talked about including ULI for sort of a brief, introduction. They're prepared to come to that meeting. I just want to make sure that we're all in agreement to have them.
So the last, thank you, Emily, for reminding us. The last time I remember talking about, we said possibly about pushing it further, and then I think you encouraged us not to push it back. So is that something that, that I'm not trying to kick the can down the road, but, is that something that maybe you could discuss as a member with the land use subcommittee and then come back? Even, is it possible for her to come back to me in the interim, and then we can make that decision on the agenda, because I won't set the agenda until.
Is there any reason not, I mean, I guess at this point, why not hear them? That's what my point of view, especially if we're now, Elizabeth, you talking about going out for bid for zoning consultant, we need to start talking.
And that, okay,
Where money is gonna be.
all right, so,
And that's-
all right, no,
We're
so,
not
so.
committing to anything, right? It's just here's who we are, here's what we do. I think we're kind of going around back and forth, so thank you for chiming in there, but I think it makes sense just to hear them out.
All right, so do you have an idea of how much time they would want?
I think probably a half an hour to be safe. I think they can
Okay.
probably go for as long or as little as we need, but a half an hour should suffice.
Okay, excellent, then why don't we just say yes?
Yeah.
Great,
Thank you.
thank you.
All right. Well, you guys last time enlightened me that the vote is a matter of standing and leaving.
Yeah, I guess we break the quorum.
Yeah, meeting, yeah.